Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Talks in Class. I'm Jenna, your host. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad that you are here with me for this conversation. I hope everyone out there has had a nice week. I am gearing up to head back to Wisconsin to visit my mom this coming weekend. I'll be there for a little over a week. And those of you who have been here a while or are following along on social media, you already know what that means. The time capsule bedroom. If you're new, welcome. My old bedroom at my mom's house is basically a time capsule of the 90s and the 2000s with so much of my old stuff in it, from toys to clothes to VHS tapes to CDs to magazines. So I always have so much fun when I visit because I get to dig through some of my old stuff that's there and see, what's there that I've forgotten about. One of my favorite things that I've been doing lately when I'm home is watching some old home movies that we have on VHS tape there. And as you can imagine, they're horrifying for the most part, but in a fun way. Now I'm far enough removed from my childhood and adolescent self that I can laugh at that now, kind of. But there's still some of them are a bit tough to watch, especially the middle school ones. So as always, I will start this episode with my what good happened for this week. As I mentioned last week, I am traveling a couple weeks in October, and when I go to my mom's, it's just like normal. I just work from there instead of here, so that's not a huge deal. But the other trip, we're going back to the East Coast, and I want to be able to take time actually off, which I will say is the difficult thing for me about being self-employed is like you have full control over your schedule, but that control also means that you are in control of like putting boundaries up, which I'm not great at. And obviously it's just me. So there's nobody else to do the stuff when I'm not doing it. I wanted to get ahead of this podcast so we didn't miss a week. And last week I actually managed to record 2 podcast episodes. So hopefully we won't have any gaps. And I wasn't sure if I was realistically going to be able to pull that off, but I did. And I'm so happy that I did. Because one of the episodes is a very special one. My husband joined me for one of the episodes. So I'm really excited for that one to come out. I hope you guys enjoy it. It'll be a little different, obviously, because it's the 2 of us talking, but we are talking about some really fun nostalgic things. And he's a little bit older than me, so you'll get a little bit different take instead of my typical middle millennial one only. And it's just a relief to know that I won't have to worry about the podcast while I am away. So for this week's topic, I feel like this is a long time coming, actually. I can't believe I haven't covered this already because it is one of my favorite topics just in general in life, really. But also when it comes to nostalgia, I think there's so much to talk about, and it's not probably something that immediately comes to mind when people think of nostalgia, but there are so many things that do feel so nostalgic, and that is food. Or more specifically for this week, foods that we ate and somehow survived in the 90s and the 2000s. Before we get into this week's episode, I do want to share another quick tip for those of you who use my clothing rental service, the Jenna Barclay Style Box. And that is to use the DART feature when you want to rent for something specific like an event, or you just want specific items. The DART feature is a little different from the prioritize feature, which allows you to essentially choose certain items that you would prefer over other items in your closet. The DART feature actually allows you to choose the exact items that you'll receive in your next box, and it will ensure that that box ships right away so you get it faster. When you return items or you use the return notify option, you'll automatically see a pop-up alerting you that you're eligible for DART if you want to use it. And it will show you all of the items from your closet that are currently available so you can choose from those to DART your box. I like to use DART around the holidays or before a vacation or just times when I'm looking for more specific items to wear for certain events. It's of course optional, so you don't have to use it, but it's a great option for when you are looking for those particular items to wear right away. If you are interested in trying the Style Box and you haven't yet, your first month is always free. Just head to jennabarclaystylebox.com and click Get Started. Your first month free will automatically be applied. Millennials of a certain age and Gen Xers love to reflect on how generally unsafe a lot of aspects of our childhood would be perceived today. Of course, we didn't see it this way when we were kids. This was kind of normal, but we rode in the backs of station wagons, maybe sometimes even the backs of pickup trucks. We sat in smoking sections in restaurants. We played outside completely unattended until the streetlights came on and we knew we had to go home. A lot of us generally didn't have limits on things like screen time, and we weren't monitored. So we watched whatever was on TV, regardless of whether or not it was age appropriate for kids, which most of the time I feel like it wasn't. I mean, I was watching like HBO and 2020, which was just all about horrible things that happened. And, it's true. It was a very different time. I am 36, so we're talking about decades in the past now. The world was a different place, and many of us were latchkey kids. A lot of our parents kind of let us go about our business, and they had this attitude of, well, we survived so much worse, so you'll be fine, and they just kind of sent us on our way. And I think about these things a lot, especially the more time passes, but I think one of the best examples of just how unhinged things got when we were kids in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s is in the foods that we ate regularly. Or I guess we should say in the things that said they were food, the things that claimed to be food. We had desserts disguised as breakfast everywhere, candy disguised as like fruity, nutritious snacks or granola bars. Everything was ultra processed. I mean, everything came in a box or a can or the frozen foods aisle. And the amazing thing about a lot of these food products is that the marketing was completely designed for kids. And some of it was really wild if you look back on it. But the point is that these foods were marketed towards children very specifically. And if you kind of take a really basic zoomed out look at what was happening during this time, right? The 80s, 90s into the early 2000s, this makes a lot of sense. Parents were juggling things that previous generations really didn't have to. A lot more people were divorced, which meant there were a lot more parents parenting and working alone. A lot of families had two working parents outside of the home for the first time. So it just makes sense that kids were on their own more. We were a latchkey generation. Parents were busier, probably more stressed out, and had less help than ever. So, they needed these easy, convenient foods. Even better if the easy, convenient foods were things that we could make ourselves by just popping it into the microwave or the toaster. And obviously, this was long before labels like organic or natural or non-GMO or whatever became popular. I guarantee you that my parents did not give one single thought to what kinds of chemicals or dyes were in the foods that I was eating when I was a kid. Not because they were neglectful parents or didn't care about my nutrition, but this just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing that was talked about or on people's radars. My parents, when they were shopping for food, cared that it was easy, relatively cheap, and that I would eat it without putting up a fight, basically. So we had things like pizza rolls and pizza bagels and Hot Pockets and SpaghettiOs, which is just gross to think about. I loved SpaghettiOs though. TV dinners, I also loved TV dinners. I mean, these are basically the kinds of foods that I lived on as a kid and a teenager, really. And what's even better is that these easy, convenient, fast foods were marketed especially for kids, so it made it really appealing for us, like the kid cuisine TV dinners. Do you guys remember those? I guarantee you, if you would have put a Hungry Man TV dinner in front of me and told me to eat the like weird microwaved meatloaf, I would have thought it was disgusting. But the kid cuisine had that brownie, that little brownie in the little corner that would always overheat and then bubble up in the center to the point where it was practically boiling and then be all crusty around the outside. And I would burn my mouth on that brownie every single time. I never learned my lesson with the brownie. But I loved kid cuisines because they were made for kids. They had a cute little box. But the two categories that I think were really most impressive in both their marketing for kids especially, and just their sheer creativity, were snack foods and cereals. You guys, 90s kids cereals were truly on another level. I mean, I don't know who was working for these cereal companies, but bravo, A+ for creativity. We were eating straight up pure sugar disguised as part of a complete breakfast. Do you guys remember those commercials? They'd always say that at the end of the kids' cereal commercials, but then they would show what the complete breakfast was, and it would be a tiny little bowl of the sugary cereal, and then there would be, you know, a whole side of fruit, maybe some toast, or like eggs, a glass of orange juice, basically a whole other breakfast in addition to the sugary cereal, because there was no nutritional value in Cookie Crisp or Lucky Charms. You needed the other breakfast to, you know, make it complete. But it tasted good, and that's what matters. I mean, you could not tell me that Lucky Charms wasn't the greatest breakfast ever invented when I was a kid. I will say, though, I've never been a huge cereal person. Like, I feel like there are cereal people, you know what I mean? Even as adults, they still love cereal, and it's like a core thing that they eat. I was never really that person, but I did eat cereal as a kid, and I had a few favorites. I loved Apple Jacks and Honeycomb and Golden Grams. Those were probably my favorite kind of sugary cereals. And then I liked the more boring ones. Like, I loved Raisin Bran and, I don't know, Corn Flakes. And Waffle Crisps I loved. That was a good sugary one that I feel like I liked. And Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Cinnamon Toast Crunch, oh my God, that was probably the best sugary cereal that I still to this day have ever tasted. I can still taste the Cinnamon Toast Crunch and the way that the cinnamon sugar would be like in the milk swirled afterwards. I never drank the milk, but a lot of my friends did. But then there were super over-the-top ones that I always thought took it a little too far, like the Count Chocula or Reese's Puff cereal, or the one that was literally just mini Oreos. That was a cereal. Or just like Fruity Pebbles and Trix. I was never really into those kinds of cereals. I personally preferred to eat my sugar in pastry form as a kid, and I still do, honestly. I love a good pastry. But this is why I was absolutely obsessed with Pop-Tarts and later toaster strudel. Honestly, I mean, I could still get down with a good Pop-Tart. I have Pop-Tarts in my kitchen right now. I'm not gonna lie. I don't eat them often, but they are delicious. I don't even care. But when toaster strudel came out and started to like really gain popularity, I lost my mind over those a little bit. I remember thinking like, this is truly amazing. This can be my breakfast. I discovered them sometime in early high school, I want to say, so probably around 2002, 2003 maybe. And I used to use 2 of the icing packets on every toaster strudel. So the way that they would come is you would get like 6 toaster strudel and then 6 packets of icing. But I would use 2 for each one of my toaster strudel, which was delicious, but also very stupid, because that meant that by the time half the box of toaster strudel was gone, I was out of icing. So I'm not really sure what I did after that with the rest of them, but you better believe those early ones, those first ones with double icing, were delicious. When I was young, my mom always worked full-time and she had a bit of a commute, so I was on my own for breakfast from the time I was really young. I never remember growing up having breakfast with my mom. So my breakfast was always something very sugary and very carb heavy because I had to be able to prepare it myself. So it was cereal or maybe Eggo waffles that my mom would literally put in the slots of the toaster when I was really young with like a little Post-it note that was like push down so that I could make my own waffles. I'm talking I was like 8 years old. I was making my Eggo waffles in the toaster and then drenching them with syrup. Or Pop-Tarts or maybe some banana bread or some sort of like sugary bread disguised as breakfast that my mom would leave out, or cinnamon raisin toast. Oh my God. I don't know if this was just my family or if this was like a small town Midwest thing, but cinnamon raisin toast was a staple in our house, and I swear my mom still buys the exact same cinnamon raisin bread to this day, and I still eat it whenever I visit. It's the Pepperidge Farm cinnamon raisin bread, and I feel like the slices are kind of small. It's really addicting, and I can just keep eating it. She does branch out now sometimes and gets like a fancy and hopefully less processed version from the farmer's market, but the Pepperidge Farm bread is always in the house to this day. But the real shining star, I think, the real gem of, 2000s and 90s foods were the snack foods. So yes, in 2023, I have Trader Joe's and all of their marvelous snacks. But in 1999, I was living the snack dream. We lived in the golden age of kids' snacks. We had everything, you guys. Our snacks were so creative. We had like a bunch of just novelty, weird chip varieties. They were always throwing something new at us. We had those pizza chips, and then we had regular Doritos, and they were like, regular Doritos are boring. Let's have 3D Doritos. And then we had Cheetos, and they were like, Cheetos are boring. Let's have extra cheesy Cheetos that are shaped like a paw print. I mean, they were so fun, and there was always something new coming out in the snack game. We had interactive sugary snacks, you guys, like fruit roll up. Remember, they would have the little shapes kind of pre-cut in the sheet of the sugary whatever it was that you would unwrap, and then you could like pull it apart and kind of cut out the little shapes. I very, very vaguely remember having Rugrats fruit roll-ups with the characters, and you would like try to pull it apart and get the characters out, and then I guess just eat them. I don't know. We had String Thing, which was another fruity sugar snack that was basically created to encourage you to play with your food. I mean, you'd pull it apart and like make shapes out of it and then eat it. We had Gushers, which when you think about it is actually kind of a gross concept for a snack. It's like a fruit snack, but when you bite into it, it just oozes sugary liquid into your mouth. It's kind of gross, but they were delicious. They're still delicious. And then we had Fruit by the Foot, which I always personally preferred over fruit roll-ups because the texture was just a little bit softer, even though they were essentially the exact same thing, just in different formats and different packaging. And then we had all of the dipping stick type snacks. There were a lot of snacks that required dipping some sort of food stick into some other sort of food. Obviously, Dunkaroos. They are the shining star of the dipping format snacks. So delicious. I mean, 10 out of 10 for Dunkaroos. We also had those little breadsticks with the cheese sauce, and you would take the breadstick and dunk it in the cheese sauce. I loved those. That's so gross when we think about it. Like, what was in that cheese sauce? I don't want to know. I truly don't want to know. We had Fun Dip. Speaking of unhinged snacks that were dipping, I don't know if you guys remember Fun Dip. It was literally just a stick of hard candy with little packets of different color sugar dust. And the idea was that you would lick the candy stick and then you would stick it in the sugar dust and then lick the sugar dust off of the candy stick. Like, it was just a sugary vessel which was used to eat pure sugar. And that's what we had for like a snack. And if that wasn't enough sugar, speaking of sugar dust, we had Pixie Sticks, which my friends and I were briefly very obsessed over. These were just thin paper tubes. It looked like a straw, and it was just full of sugar dust. And you just rip the end off of it and eat it. Just pure sugar just down the hatch. We did have some wild candy too, just in general. I actually remember as a kid getting Jawbreakers, actual Jawbreakers out of vending machines at like the movie theater or Pizza Hut or something, and taking the Jawbreaker out of the little plastic cup that it came in and just eating it, chomping down on a giant candy ball that was hard as a rock and could literally choke me to death. I mean, they did make a whole movie about dying by choking on a Jawbreaker called Jawbreaker, which, by the way, is one of the best movies of the 90s. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend. My favorite candy of the 90s, by far, were the Spice Girls lollipops. If you do not remember the Spice Girls lollipops, these were the most exciting candy I think that I have ever experienced still to this day. They were just lollipops, but they had the Spice Girls faces printed on them. Nothing like eating some ink or whatever it was with your sugar candy, but we went wild for these. They had special Spice Girls packaging, and each Spice Girl had her own lollipop, so we would try to collect them. And I think they came with like swag inside, maybe stickers or something like that. But I remember trekking around my local mall, going to all of these different stores, searching high and low for these lollipops in like 1997. They were so popular and so hard to find. And by the way, if you still happen to have any of these Spice Girls lollipops in the packaging, they are selling for insane prices on eBay. So just a tip. There were actually a lot of weird and creative lollipop variations back in the day. And you know, to be fair, I don't really follow candy these days, so these may very well still exist, but these are a few that I remember from my childhood. Obviously, there were ring pops. Those were very popular, very important. You had to propose to one of your friends with a ring pop, or you simply did not live through the 90s. Blow pops, which had a big wad of gum in the center that would lose its flavor after approximately 8 seconds and really hurt your jaw. I mean, it was a large chunk of gum. There were these lollipops called Melody Pops. Does anyone remember this? It was a lollipop, but it was kind of like a little recorder, like flute thing made out of the candy though. So the actual lollipop was an instrument that you could blow into and it would make noise. And I think the stick that held the lollipop might have had like a slider of some sort, so you could actually play different notes on your little Melody Pop. I remember these, and I remember that this is gross, but as you would eat them, they would get like really slimy and slobbery towards the end. They were kind of gross. And then there were the caramel apple lollipops. You guys, these were a certified trend in my elementary school. And I just saw these at Target the other day in the Halloween candy aisle, and I was transported through time. I didn't know that they still made them. But these absolutely took my elementary school class by storm around maybe 1996, 1997, and actually spawned my very first little business venture. At the ripe old age of 9 or however old I was, I somehow convinced my mother to buy the big family packages of caramel apple lollipops, blow pops, and sour warheads. Talk about a staple candy of 90s children. And I brought these giant bags of candy to school and I sold it to my classmates on the playground, like individually. Even then, I guess I understood wholesaling. I don't know where 4th graders got money to buy, black market warheads off of me under the monkey bars. I really don't know, but I did this. And I remember at this time, for some reason, warheads had just gained an extreme level of popularity amongst young people. Very bizarre. I'm talking prime hydration level of popularity, but before social media. I'm not sure how this happened, but kids were obsessed with these stupid little sour candies. And for a while, I do feel like they were kind of hard to find. So I had the market on these sour warheads. I had kind of a booming business, you guys. Like, people would line up to get them and they wanted specific flavors. I wish I could remember how much I'd charge. Honestly, this is just another reason why I'm so thankful that we did not have social media when I was a kid, because if we did, we would have been taking endless videos of us attempting to, stuff 10 black cherry warheads in our mouth at recess and try not to cry. I don't know. We really thought these candies were the coolest things ever made. And obviously it was a bonus that they were painfully sour, because it became like a challenge. And especially when you're at this age, like 9, 10, 11 years old, we all had to claim that we didn't think they were that sour, even though we all knew they were super sour and they were kind of disgusting. I mean, they would like burn your tongue with the sour. They were not particularly good. But sadly, my underground candy ring did get busted pretty quickly by some teachers who understandably probably just didn't want their entire class full of 10-year-old students hopped up on sugar all day long. So, fair enough. But I will credit sour warheads and caramel apple lollipops with sparking my entrepreneurial spirit at a very young age. And speaking of food trends, I'm not sure if my friends and I were just like extreme followers or if this was kind of a universal experience, but we were very susceptible to food envy as children. I remember there would be certain snacks or food items that maybe one kid brought in their lunchbox, or maybe we had at a sleepover, and suddenly everyone would need to also have these food items. It was very weird. But the prime example of this was the pizza Lunchable. Lunchable in general I mean, they were overpriced for what they were. So they were really reserved for special occasions amongst my friend group growing up. I grew up in a rural, like, farm town. The parents there were not spending on some luxury little package of cheese and crackers for an everyday lunch. Like, this was a luxury to have a Lunchable. Most kids, I would say, ate the school lunches, which could be an episode all on its own to talk about school lunch foods. But a few of us brought what we called cold lunch. This is what we called lunch from home. Hot lunch was school lunch, cold lunch was brought from home. And I was a cold lunch kid through a lot of elementary school, and I feel like cold lunch kids set a lot of the food trends. My standard cold lunch was some sort of sandwich, probably peanut butter and jelly, probably like an apple slice or an orange or some sort of fruit, always a strawberry, kiwi, Capri Sun, and always a little Debbie snack. It was usually a cosmic brownie or a zebra cake, and I feel like Little Debbie's had this moment amongst the cold lunch crowd in my elementary school. Especially the cosmic brownies, the zebra cakes, they were the thing to have in your cold lunch. And we would trade them at lunch. So if somebody had maybe a bag of Cheetos and you had a cosmic brownie, you could get somebody's Cheetos and probably somebody's ice cream from the little ice cream cart after lunch for your Little Debbie cake. I mean, they were very, very cool. But even the hot lunch kids brought their own lunch when we would take school field trips. And this is when the real food envy happened, because for some reason we treated field trip lunches as like a special occasion. So this is when we brought out the big guns. Some kids' parents would even let them pack a soda for their lunches for a field trip. So, all bets were off. We had candy, we had sodas, we had crazy things. And this is when the Lunchables came into play, because for some reason, every kid in my elementary school had to have a Lunchable whenever we went on a field trip. And when the pizza Lunchables came out, I don't know, we all lost our little minds. It was game over. I'm going to admit something, and I don't think this is a hot take. I think a lot of people actually feel this way, and we've all just been hiding it for all these years. I never liked the pizza Lunchables. You guys, they're disgusting. Let's just say it like it is. It's a cold, kind of flaky cracker crust with cold marinara and cold unmelted cheese on it. Like, please, you got, like, nobody thought that was good. And even worse if you got the pepperoni version, so you added cold processed meats on top of your cold cracker marinara sauce concoction. Blech. I mean, you guys, come on. That is foul. Like, that is disgusting. But for some reason, every time we had a field trip, we all dragged our parents to the Piggly Wiggly and begged for a freaking pizza Lunchable. And I was influenced for a while and pretended that the pizza Lunchable was the most delicious and amazing thing I had ever tasted. But I it's time to come clean. They're disgusting and gross. And we can't forget about the beverages. If the cereals that turned our milks rainbow color in the bowl weren't shocking enough, we washed down our afternoon snack with glowing neon sugary concoction liquids, just purely composed of sugar and various food dyes. Elder millennials and Gen Xers had the Ecto Cooler High C, which was neon green flavored High C punch that just had a genius marketing tie-in from the movie Ghostbusters. My generation, I'm like a mid-millennial, we had Kool-Aid jammers, and they were in those squeezy plastic bottles with the top that would twist off. They were so sugary, you guys. I can still taste some of them. I really like the blue one. It tasted like pure sugar. And I loved them. And then, of course, there was like Sunny D and Capri Sun. This is like so embarrassing, but I actually remember thinking that Capri Suns were kind of a healthy choice. And it's probably just because they tasted less sugary than the other options that we had, like Kool-Aid jammers or those little barrel drinks with the foil top that was also just pure sugar water with some flavoring. And then we had sodas, and we had the most unhinged sodas ever. I don't care what anybody says. The sodas of the 90s and the 2000s were just next level bonkers, you guys. We had Mountain Dew Cold Red. Do you remember that? They really tried to make that happen. And I kind of thought it was good for like 5 minutes, but I can't really remember what it tasted like now. Sprite Remix though, do you guys remember those? I think I liked Sprite Remix. From what I remember, it was just a flavored Sprite. I think it was Sprite with some sort of strawberry or raspberry kind of flavoring to it, but I always liked any variation of a Sprite-esque soda. We also had weird Pepsi variations like Crystal Pepsi, which I don't even know what the point of that was. I don't know if it tasted any different. I think it was just Pepsi that was clear, so it was just a marketing gimmick. And then there was also Pepsi Blue, which I am almost positive I never tried. I could not tell you what that tasted like. We also had really good fruity sodas like Slice soda. I remember loving Slice soda. The orange one was my favorite. I liked any variation of orange soda. And if you were a Nickelodeon kid, you loved orange soda, especially if you watched Keenan and Kel. And then we had Fruitopia, which I guess I know is not technically a soda, but it was a fruity beverage and it feels like it belongs in that category. So we're just going to leave it there. And then there was Surge, you guys. Surge was the soda of the late 90s. And my age group aligned perfectly with the phenomenon that was Surge soda. I think it came out in 1997. I was 10 years old in 1997. So this was just made for me. And I actually remember thinking that it tasted really good. It was kind of Sprite-esque or kind of like a less gross, maybe a little bit less sweet Mountain Dew, but it was lime green. The actual beverage was lime green and the marketing was just so good. The can design had a very 90s Nickelodeon-esque design. It basically had a big splat that looked like, you know, the Nickelodeon logo or slime, and it said Surge really big in this bold black font inside the splat. And it became a big controversy, and I can't exactly remember why. I think it had something to do with the caffeine content. It was like dangerously high for kids or something. It might have been the caffeine content and the sugar content were dangerously high for kids, but I remember it started to get banned. Like they would ban it from vending machines and parents wouldn't buy it for their kids, and it became this big thing that like having Surge was a rebellious act. But I do remember for this brief, beautiful moment in the late 90s, Surge was everywhere. And we ate it up, my friends and I. We stocked up on Surge for all of our sleepovers before all of the parents realized that it was like so bad for us. and actually tried to keep us from drinking it. We would have it at all of our sleepovers and we would just suck it down can after can so that we could stay up all night watching Spice Girls VHS tapes and calling the local radio station to dedicate songs to boys and taking quizzes in magazines and painting our nails with our little Bon Bon nail polishes. But I don't remember casually sipping Surge like after school while watching Saved by the Bell reruns. I think it was a special occasion drink only. And speaking of after school beverages of choice, I'm going to wrap this episode up by sharing my top 5 most essential foods from the Y2K era, presented as a what I ate in a day from the year 2000. Number 5, Pop-Tarts. I would always start the day with some sort of carb-heavy processed sweet breakfast before slathering on a nice layer of Dr. Pepper lip smackers and running to catch the bus off to middle school. And Pop-Tarts were always my pastry of choice, especially for some reason the strawberry ones. Those were so good. Number 4, Tic Tacs and sour Altoids. My mid-morning snack, if you could call it that, in between English and history class in 8th grade would typically consist of weird breath mint style candies that I would hoard in my locker. This was another thing I somehow convinced my mom to buy in like the value packs, and I would keep them all in my locker. My favorites were the spearmint Tic Tacs, the green ones, and sour Altoids, mostly because I think they came in that cool little tin. I think that's like 90% of the reason why so many of us love the sour Altoids. I remember in 7th grade, my crush / air quotes boyfriend had the combination to my locker so that he could help himself to my stash of Tic Tacs and Polar Ice gum. Number 3, public school lunch pizza. Any kid who ever got hot lunch at a US public school in the 90s or early 2000s can probably taste this pizza just at the mere mention of it. And honestly, as objectively gross as I know this pizza was, this was my favorite school lunch by far. I would gobble down that weird square chunk of pizza with its overly sweet sauce and the weird little chunks of sausages buried in the cheese with absolute and total joy every single time it was on the menu. Number 2, speaking of pizza rolls, because after school, I had to have a snack. So I'd head straight to the kitchen to microwave some pizza rolls to the point where they were practically boiling inside, but still cold on the outside because microwaves never get it right. And then of course I would burn the roof of my mouth beyond repair on the first bite. And then I would head downstairs with my little plate of pizza rolls to the family room where I would log on to AOL and watch TRL. And this was the perfect after school scenario. Seriously, like, what a time to be alive. Also, possibly hot take, but I always preferred pizza rolls over pizza bagels. I'm not sure why, but I stand by that decision even today. Pizza rolls are delicious. And number 1, Schwann's ice cream sundaes in those little plastic cups with the cardboard kind of paper top that you would rip off. Because after I polished off my after school snack, I would head straight to the freezer as long as my mom wasn't home yet to tell me not to spoil my dinner, and I would grab one of these little ice creams. You guys know these ice cream treats. I don't care if you bought them from an ice cream truck or maybe the school like ice cream thing. We had like ice cream days at school or at the public pool, but these were the generic little vanilla ice cream sundae cups you could get everywhere in those days. It was vanilla ice cream in a plastic cup, and it either had a chocolate swirl or maybe a strawberry or a cherry swirl in it, and you would eat it with the little wooden spatula spoon that would come attached to the lid of each cup. They were amazing. And in our neighborhood, we got them from the Schwann's man, who would literally come ring our doorbell once a week, and we would buy frozen food off of a truck that he would drive around. Well, now that I've made myself super hungry with all this talk of our glorious 90s junk food, I think I need to go eat. But I hope that you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I didn't even get to dig into all the weird diet culture-y, like low calorie, low fat snacks of the 90s and 2000s, so maybe we'll save that for another time. If you did enjoy this episode, I would so appreciate it if you would share it with a friend who might also enjoy it. I'll be back next week, so until then, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I will see you then. Bye!